Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I'm going to continue my series on converting the board game Source of the Nile, and we're going to look more at interacting with people, in particular, what happens when they are hostile. So we've run into someone quite quickly here. We have a group of around 25 warriors. Because we have this message that says that we rolled a 4 and a 6 and a 6, we know that it would probably be 24 exactly, or it should be 24 because the 6 is taken down to 1 because we're so near to the start, and then 4 times 6 times 1 becomes 24. So we have this choice the same as that we had before, and let's say that we seek contact with the locals with great caution and a great show of force, and we get these messages that we've rolled this, and then the natives charge the expedition. So it turns out that they were hostile, and we get charged, which is actually a better result than it could be. We could have got the result that they were ambushed. And as we'll see in future videos, being ambushed is worse than being charged. Being charged sort of implies that we can see them coming, and so we'll have a relative advantage, or at least we would if once the code is done. Being charged is better than being ambushed. But I'm going to spend the rest of the video looking at the code that allows this to happen. So let's get into that. So as you will recall, in this screen, meeting 2, that determines whether the natives are, or locals. There's no name for them in this game. Source of the Nile calls them natives. I've generally called them locals. But either way, this screen determines the chance that they're not hostile, and then it rolls dice to see whether they're hostile or neutral. We've already dealt with that in the last video, so today we're going to deal essentially with this screen here. So here's how it works. We have a variable w, and we set w to be equal to y times this long calculation here. Actually, let's zoom in, sorry. Make it a bit bigger. Okay, so we set w equal to y times 1 plus $p0 plus $ex5, and then we divide by z. So what does that mean? Well, it's written in the comments here. Y is a number based on how far inland we are. If we're 1 to 10 miles inland, Y will be 1. If we're 11 to 20 miles inland, Y will be 2, and so on. We multiply that by 1 for the player character. $P0 is how many specialists you have, so it's how many missionaries. If you have the missionary, the explorer, the doctor, the journalist, etc. P0 is how many of those you have, if any. And then EX5 is the number of guards. So this is essentially the number of people who can fight. Now, it's possible that either you, the player character, and or some of these specialists will be sick and therefore not able to fight. But it doesn't take that into account. You still, in the rules as written, they still count towards the total. And I'm thinking of changing that in the future so that if anyone's sick, that reduces the total. But for now, that seems more realistic, because in the game, if you're sick, you're seriously sick. You're not just sort of, I got a cough or something. It means that you're sick enough that you have to be carried. So you're sort of obviously sick. It would be obvious to people looking at you that that you weren't in sort of fighting condition. But for now, that isn't taken into account. And then you divide by the policy selected. So what does this variable do? Well, basically it does this. We compare it to ISI, and ISI is the number of warriors in the group that we've encountered. And so W sort of represents how intimidating they find you. Essentially, if W is greater than IS square bracket $I n square bracket, then the result of the encounter is that they hide from you, and it goes to check MP. Check MP is just the next stage in the main sequence of a turn. So it just means that they hide from you and you continue on your way. So what is the logic of making the calculation of how intimidating you are this? Well, as you get further inland, Europeans are less familiar to the people that you meet, and so therefore the more likely they are to find you strange. So I guess that's the rationale for having it be having Y increase how intimidating you are. Although, as we've already discussed, they're more likely to be hostile if they're close to the city where you start, because of bad experiences they've had. So that seems a little odd. But, anyway, rules as written, that's how it works. Obviously, you would multiply by the number of people. Well, yeah, that makes sense. The more people there are in the group, the more intimidating that group is. And the reason you divide by Z is that the Z is the policy that you chose, and the higher numbers represent a more friendly approach. So the friendlier you are, the less intimidating you are. So that that makes sense. So in terms of sort of realism, or in terms of what we've established about the setting, those two I think make sense. I'm not completely sure about having how far you are inland increase that number and make you more intimidating, but that's what the rules say. So that checks whether they hide from you, and if not, they're going to attack you. And as it says here, they will charge or ambush. In other words, the attacks are sort of divided in the game into charges and ambushes, with ambushes being more dangerous. Obviously, as the name suggests, an ambush means that they sort of got the drop on you, and specifically it means you don't get to fire off your muskets. So how does that work? Well, we rolled. So we would have, when we in the example, we would have got that number would have been 1. This number would have been 13, and then we would have divided 13 by 3, and that would have got us a little bit over 4. And of course, there were much more than 4 warriors, so we weren't anywhere close to having them hide from us. And in fact, you would only get people hiding from you probably if it was a very small group of warriors, if you were quite far inland, or if you had tried a hostile type of approach, one of the lower numbers. We tried a friendly approach, and we were in quite close to the city, and we had a smallish group, so there wasn't really any chance that they would hide from us. So then we set W, because we don't need this calculation anymore. That's only for if they hide from us. So we can put new data into W. And we set W equal to math.max, and the two numbers that we're choosing the higher of are random 1 to 6 and random 1 to 6. So that is the same thing as rolling 2 ordinary dice and picking whichever number is the highest. Now, that wouldn't have been the 10 that we got. That 10 that we got, that when it said testing only rolled 10, that wouldn't have been that. You can't get 10 on a 6-sided dice. That 10 would have been in this page. It would have been here when we were rolling to see whether they were hostile or neutral. So we got a 6, which is quite lucky, because as you'll see, higher numbers are better for us. But it's not as lucky as you might think, because if you roll 2 dice and take the highest, you get a 6 11 times out of 36 on average. So it's almost 1 time in 3. So it's sixes are a lot more common perhaps than you'd instinctively think. But we did get one. Then we have these modifiers. If EM is equal to 2 and TN square bracket TE, or $TN square bracket $TE square bracket 1 N square bracket $I N square bracket N square bracket does not equal, quote, desert, end quote, then we add 1 to W, and then and if that's not true, and if EM does not equal 2 and TN TE 1I is equal to desert, then we subtract 1. So what does that mean? Well, EM is a measure of how the expedition is travelling, and if EM equals 2, that means you are travelling on horseback. And if you are travelling on horseback, this basically means what sort of terrain are we in. We've dealt with this a lot before when we were generating terrain. We saw specifically this string of code. TE 1I is what a number that says what terrain you're in, and then TN is the names of the different types of terrain. And I have found it easier to code using strings rather than using the numeric value in there, because it's easy to look at and see which terrain is indicated. I could just say if TE $1I does not equal 4 or whatever the number for desert is, but then when I came back and looked at it, and when other people looked at it, it wouldn't be obvious we were talking about desert. So that might make mistakes a bit easier. So instead I've done if TN, that number, does not equal desert, and then anyone looking at it can see that we're talking about desert. So if you're mounted and if you're not in the desert, you add 1 to the roll, and a higher roll is better. So being mounted and not in the desert means that you're less likely to be ambushed. I can see the logic for being mounted. Well, of course, it's probably more difficult to ambush a party that's moving on horseback, just because they move faster, I guess, on average. Not in the desert, that seems a bit wrong to me. I would have thought it'd be more difficult to ambush someone in the desert, because it's, by its nature, it's open, and they could sort of see you coming. But anyway, again, I'm going by rules as written. If you're mounted and not in desert, you add 1, and if you are not mounted and in the desert, if you're walking on foot in the desert, then we reduce W by 1, making it easier for you to be ambushed. And then finally we say if W is less than Z, we include ambush. Else, so if W is greater than or equal to Z, we include charge. Well, we haven't, and then of course, at the moment, we haven't got any code in either of these. It's just, except for just natives ambush. Oh, there you go. I have said natives instead of locals. You just get a message that says they ambush the expedition or they charge the expedition. This will probably be the code that we'll do next and talk about next. But that is how that works. We first see whether they hide from us, and then if they are not sort of intimidated by us and frightened by us, then we see whether they are sort of cunning enough to set up an ambush, and if not, then we get the charge, which is the somewhat less dangerous form of combat. As I say, there's a few things that sort of seem unrealistic to me. I would have thought it would be easier to set up an ambush in the hills, say, or in the forest, because in the forest you can hide behind stuff. But I'll talk about it online and sort of see what I see. But for the moment, I've just done the rules as written, and that's how we determine what happens to us. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.